before I start, I'm going to turn this light off because it's shining at the camera. And when I was planning to go to university, there was the question asked. I was going to study history, and they said, what is the point of history and historiography? And today I would say that the point of history is to, it's a bit of entertainment, it's a bit like a soap opera or something like that. It's something to read. Then, however, I believe that the point of history was to learn from the past so that the same mistakes would never happen again in the future. I no longer believe that, because it's quite clear that people will continue. You've got the glaring examples from the past, and that people just do not learn at all from previous experience, which is of course a pity. And this is something that we see what is going on today. Today in the Middle East is a constant repetition of many times of events which have happened even within the last few years. And I don't really know where to start with this one, but let's go back a very long time. Let's go back to the beginning of the 20th century, 1906. And in that year, let's go back even further. Let's go back to 1880, when the United Kingdom occupied Egypt. Egypt occupied it, but still theoretically the overlord of Egypt was Ottoman Empire, Turkey. And together with Egypt, it then occupied the Sudan, so that Egypt, which was theoretically had the suzerain of that country, was Turkey, although it was occupied by the United Kingdom, and then occupied Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. So the one thing, however, the United Kingdom did in 1906, they created a border commission with Turkey. And if you find the map, as I have done, you will notice that the border is exactly the same as it is today for Egypt's border with Israel. And so that border was set out in 1906, with one exception. There is part which is Gaza. So Gaza, of course, isn't on the map. It is on the map, but it's no border around it. Gaza was then in Turkey. It was occupied by the United Kingdom during the First World War. And at that time, after the First World War, despite the fact that the British and French government, or British government, had promised independence to the Arab nations as a way to get them to revolt against the Turks in 1915, Britain and France decided to divide the northernmost provinces, which had been taken away from the Turks, amongst themselves. So France got Syria, Britain Iraq, and Britain ended up with also Jordan and what is today Israel, or should we say Palestine. So the now, without going through an entire history of how this came, how the state of Israel actually came about, I would actually like to point a couple of things out which you don't often hear, if at all. The first thing I'd have to say out is why, in agreeing that a Jewish state was absolutely necessary, Jewish people had suffered from 1,000 years of persecution. Even let's go back to when the first crusade was preached at Clermont-Ferrand in 1095, and so the Greek, the Eastern Greek Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, had requested assistance in 1072 for people to go and free the Holy Land from the Muslims who had occupied it, and they it took them 20 years to get round to it, and by the time they got round to it, they preached, so you'll be going over there and you'll have the church and God and what have you will be on your side. And so all you got to do is go over there and massacre everybody on the route, and you'll go into heaven. And then so there were people who couldn't be bothered to go that way, and in order to get into heaven, they massacred the people who were instantly available. And for example, here in Germany, where I am now, in Rhineland and other places, terrible massacres were committed against Jews. In the United Kingdom, at this time the Third Crusade, you have the very famous case in York and Clifford Tower of a massacre taking place. In 1144 in Norwich, there was the very first example of the blood libel which came out. So you've got these very deeply ingrained hatred against Jews which existed in the Christian communities. And this persecution from the time of the Crusades to the Spanish Inquisition, to blaming Jews for the Black Death and other things, to eventually leading up to the Holocaust, this was something very deeply ingrained in a Western tradition. Of course, Jews moved eastwards, but as the Russian Empire moved westward, it ended up with huge amounts of Jews in its care. And or rather not care. Massive pogroms. The word pogrom comes from Russian, and this led to what was the greatest wave of emigration. That's the Jewish people from Russia to above all the United States, which took place above all in the last quarter of the 19th century. Indeed, the first Immigration Act in the United Kingdom was actually in 1906 was actually designed to stop more Jews coming into the United Kingdom, realizing that the amount of people who could potentially leave Russia and come to the UK. But so that is, I did a video actually from one place on the former Russian-German borders, now in the middle of Poland. I believe that just about every Jew in the United States had some relative that passed through that border. So this was this huge wave of people that left. Now, it was an Austrian who came up with the idea of, wrote a book called The Jewish State, and Herzl, and he set up the World Zionist Congress. Most people in Western Europe, including Germany, Austria, didn't think it was a particularly good idea, but I think that this became very popular, the idea amongst the masses who could understand in Russia, or those territories which were occupied by Russia. After the Holocaust took place, when Jews found themselves in a situation which they could not escape from, I think there was an extremely good argument for setting up a Jewish state. However, as it was largely the result of the two churches, the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Moscow-based Eastern Orthodox Church, which had been responsible for all of this hatred, which had gone on for all of these years, surely it would have made more sense to have set up a Jewish state within the territories that were in Europe. In Muslim lands, there were pogroms, but not many. I mean, the amount of pogroms in all history in Muslim territories probably equal to some of the one year in Russia in the 19th century. So it's rather unfortunate that it was therefore to Palestine that Jews went. The problem, of course, was the religion. Judaism comes from Palestine. The stories from the Bible are from Palestine. The religion, which had previously been based around a temple, which was destroyed first of all by the Babylonians, and then there was one that was built 2,500 years ago, which was destroyed by the Romans, and we'll have the 1,900 years ago. We'll have the anniversary before long, and it's unfortunate that it should have actually have had to have gone here to there. But anyway, Jews ended up in Palestine. A national home was created there. The idea of Jerusalem is an integral part of the religion. Maybe even in prayers which are used after eating, the word Jerusalem is mentioned. So that is why. That's why to go back after, I don't know what, 2,000 years or thereabout, or nearly 1,900. How many generations are there? Huge amount of generations of people which went largely from Europe. Well, largely is one point. Now, one thing that is often not mentioned is that whereas the first people in Palestine were Jewish, were sort of native Jews who sort of just stayed there all that time, but they were in a small minority. Immigration happened largely from Europe in the early parts, but by around 1952-3, the overwhelming bulk of people, Jewish people in Israel, were from Arab countries. They were not Europeans. And this is something which is often forgotten. So when we talk of, for example, in 1950, it was 950,000 Palestinians who had been forced out of their homes. If there's a war going on and you leave your home voluntarily, I think that's the same as being forced out your home. But there were people clearly who were forced at gunpoint to leave. And so 950,000 Palestinian refugees, but there were a similar number of actual Jewish refugees from places such as North Africa, Yemen, and others. People had more or less get Iraq, who didn't have a great deal of choice and they left. Indeed, there were still people living in Israel in tents as late as 1964. But I think here we have part of the problem, whereas no one actually mentions the fact of Jewish refugees. It's always on the fate of the Palestinian refugees, almost 1 million of them, who today actually number nearly 6 million. So now in the third or fourth generation of Palestinian refugees. So I think that's one thing that has to be borne in mind. And now I do appreciate that the fact that somebody was kicked out of Yemen in 1948 may be sad, but you may say, well, I'm a Palestinian, why should I have to leave my home in Jaffa? And yes, I agree, that's a good argument. It's a very good argument. It's also stated at the time when Israel was set up that the British government, which had had enough of the problems there, and wanted to divide, or rather it was the United Nations, which wanted to divide the country in two. And the arguments often being put forward, well, the Jewish state was getting 55% of the land, the Arab state only 45%. Well, yeah, but most of that land, the 55%, was in the Negev desert. But I do accept the point that the Jewish state, which was proposed then, was almost 50% Arab. So who might not have welcomed the Jews living amongst them. Now, personally, I think if the Jewish state should have been set up amongst the somewhere in the lands of the persecutors, and there was a territory which was ideally suited to that, which was East Prussia. If East Prussia had been given to the Jews as a Jewish homeland, then we wouldn't have the problems we have now. But having said that, it's a bit late to do that, and I don't know if that was ever suggested at the time. I mean, I have said this at other times, and people have said, yeah, that was suggested, but I don't know by whom. And it may sound like a crackpot idea, but why not? East Prussia was largely uninhabited, where people fled from the Soviet Union in 1945, and largely uninhabited, not entirely, but there was a huge population exodus from there, so that would have made a very good location. And if anybody really was missing Jerusalem, then they could have maybe built a model of it, and it would have saved lots of problems. Having said that, that is not what happened, and now we get to the situation we are in today. Now, when I yeah, well, Poland and the USSR might not have frowned upon it at the time. Yeah, certainly if it would happen today, I don't think that would happen. But I meant in 1945. I'm not suggesting that the Polish and Russian population of former East Prussia should leave today. I'm just mentioning it at the time that was something that might have worked then. Anyway, it didn't. Now, it is clear that the independence of Israel, to a large extent, is due to the intervention of, above all, the United States. And when there were those number of countries actually voted for Israel's creation of Israel in the United Nations, some of them, such as France, for example, which was dependent on the aid from the United States. I think Cuba got a loan out of the United States because it voted for it, and so it's largely thanks to the intervention of the United States that Israel actually was set up there. Now, the big question, of course, is this. Now, it's happened. The Jewish people live in about 2/3 or something like that, anyway, of Jewish people in the world. It's just over 15 million, I think. It's about 10 million have Israeli nationality, and so they live in 2/3 of people live in Israel today. They're not leaving, and it can't be expected to leave, and this is part of where the problem lies, because every time there is some type of attempt at peace agreements, it doesn't work out, and it doesn't work out, I think, because of the lunatic fringes on both sides. I have noticed when I did a few years ago, I interviewed somebody from Fatah, and I thought, well, if I was with him, and the first thing I thought, if it was me negotiating, there's absolutely no way I would come to any agreement with them. But after we'd been sitting there for 2 hours, I realized if I had been on the Israeli side, I could have come to an agreement with him. And the thing is that he was clearly talking to me, and and obviously I don't represent the Israeli government anyway. But there always would be extremists who don't want an agreement. Now, and when you hear, for example, today, you hear people from Hamas, even in the last week, talking of just getting rid of all the Jews in Israel. Well, you know, there's absolutely no way in those circumstances that any type of peace agreement can be got at. So therefore, I believe that the best way is to try and isolate the lunatics on both sides, and I stress on both sides. Now, what happened on the 7th of October is absolutely it's utterly horrific. This is medieval barbarism of the worst kind. But in saying that, we should also appreciate that, and this is something which Trump, somebody I usually completely disagree with, but he said something about Hezbollah, possibly doesn't know the difference between Hezbollah and Hamas, but he said they were very smart. And the fact of the matter is, in the way that they attacked the Israeli border was indeed very well planned. And now we have a problem, is unless we recognize, okay, we're dealing with people who are extremely barbaric, but the people above them clearly have very well trained and thought of this out in a extremely I don't know what the word is, military manner, let's say. And so sophistication, that's the word, it was sophisticated. So indeed, when the first question I think we need to ask is why. Now we know now. I believed initially that I started criticizing the government, and this was because friends of mine have been stuck things on the internet, and I started agreeing with them that this was due to so the lunatics and on the Orthodox Jewish side. But yes, I no longer believe that that was the case, because this action had been prepared at least 2 years in advance, according to something which was an interview, I think it was on CNN, with somebody from Hamas. So if this had been prepared that much in advance, they also, it would seem that they set up mock-ups of the border posts which they broke through in, and to do something like that, that shows a level of sophistication and training that that we must have some kind of respect to understand what they are capable of. Now, the next thing is why, and this is the question that nobody is asking. I don't mean by this why because there's a siege of Gaza now since 2006, a blockade and Israeli occupation. These are the words which are used. Why did they use this level of violence when if their aim was to kill people, then just a bullet would have done? Why did they do it? And there's a reason for it in my opinion. When crimes are committed of this nature, it either shows extreme hate, which may be the case, but more at the point, it wants to get a reaction. And that was what I believe is the case. It was this effort to get the reaction from Israel. What reaction would it be? And the reaction is precisely the reaction that we are seeing now. And therefore, in my opinion, Israel is doing precisely what Hamas wants. And now, so I presume the idea is to lure Israeli soldiers into Gaza, and then they've had all this time to prepare their defenses, their tunnels, and all the rest of it. And if you look at the tunnels that you see on some of the videos that Hamas have put and all the rest of it, these are tunnels like if you go into some Hitler's bunker at Berchtesgaden or something like that. These are normal tunnels. It's a concrete. It seems to be reinforced concrete with, you can see electric wiring, you can see piping down it. These are very well prepared tunnels, and we can assume therefore that maybe they've got them all over the place. So this isn't like fighting in the Warsaw Ghetto or Warsaw Uprising in the sewers and things of that nature. These are relatively comfortable, but certainly well prepared tunnels. That's the first thing. The next thing, there have been videos put out by Hamas which appear to show advanced levels of training. And I refer to this by the way they're actually holding their weapons, not in the way that most of us are trained. I haven't got a weapon to hold, but you sort of hold it. They're holding the much closer to the end of the barrel. I've forgotten the word for this now. C-clamp or something. I can't quite remember it. But this is something which has been used in more recent times. And but there are special forces units which are actually trained like this. These days, when the first time I saw it, I thought that looks daft. Why they're doing that? Then I found out that people are actually being trained like this nowadays, which shows a more. And now the question then comes: okay, I mean, were they doing this training in Gaza? And which shows how the Israeli occupation isn't occupying it very well. or were they doing it somewhere else? Now, David here has just mentioned the North Vietnamese tunnel system. If the I've got incredible amount of respect for the NVA and the Viet Cong because of these tunnel systems. There was absolutely, but these tunnel systems weren't like the ones that we see today in Gaza. They were the sort of tunnels like you might see in The Great Escape or something like that. It's that type of thing. So I personally believe that. The external actors who gave a lot of support to them. So I believe that the objective was to encourage an Israeli reaction that we're getting now. Now, why would they want that? Well, first of all, for every single person who gets killed in the bombing, in the crossfire, in Gaza, that is more potential money for Hamas, it's more potential recruits, and so that is, it's a recruitment. They don't care how much is destroyed out there. They have been what now 4, 5 wars with Gaza. This buildings are. They've got brand new buildings which are getting blown up every couple of years. It is absolutely an absurd situation. Now, if I believe that this is the wrong thing to do, and I do, then what else do you do? Does one allow the fact that they've taken 199 hostages, that they murdered 1,500 people in 1,400, I think it is, sorry, some of them in dreadfully brutal circumstances, and also let's remember that the Israeli Defense Forces must have been dreadfully humiliated by what happened. Furthermore, could Hamas even have known that this would actually happen? Surely they would have planned for something else. Now, the ability to actually make decisions when your plans change shows obviously that every military person should do that. But I would have thought that they would have expected to have knocked out maybe the initial border posts and then have a quick raid and come back. But they never expected to have the advance they actually have. Some of them got halfway to the West Bank. They could have split Israel in two. I mean, nobody could have expected the Israeli army to take like 6 hours to. I mean, in 6 hours you can cycle. Well, not even cycle. I mean, you can cycle with rests coming from Tel Aviv. It's only about 40 kilometers away to Sderot. So it's absolutely. I suppose maybe one day we'll know more about it and why it happened. It's just that these things, I'm just pointing things out which I haven't heard anybody else say. So that's I'm sure that other people know more than I do anyway. So right, so I've got to propose. If I think this is wrong, what is the alternative? And now that's the problem, because as long as I see it, there's only one alternative, and that's to do nothing and to let it go as it was before. Maybe there should have been a moment of calm to say, look, we're going to think about this, and then maybe. I believe the following, though. They've taken 199 hostages, and now there was talk of are these hostages to be got out or to be left there? Now, there is a reason why paying ransom money in many countries is illegal. And the reason is this, is that if you pay ransom, then you just encourage more hostages or kidnappings to take place. In 2006, we had the Israeli corporal Gilad, I've forgotten his surname. Somebody will write it down. Taken prisoner. He was released in 2011, but he was released for over 1,029 Palestinian prisoners, and some of those prisoners, there was at least 2 I know of. They then went on to plan things such as this. Indeed, I saw something on the IDF website, YouTube channel a couple of days ago. It showed one person and showed what the crimes he'd committed, and then I pointed out that what they had forgot to mention was the fact that he'd been arrested in 1988. He'd even had a medical operation in an Israeli hospital. I think it was in 2008, and he was released. And he was released to go and commit crimes such as this one. He was released in exchange, in an exchange deal. So this is the problem. If they hadn't have done that earlier exchange deal, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Now, there's another thing which I need to point out, because I talked about the lunatics on both sides, but certainly there's something about the Israeli triumphalism which has existed, certainly with this government, with Netanyahu. Now, I appreciate that Netanyahu is not responsible. Sorry, that's not entirely true. I think he is responsible, but he's not responsible for the plan of this happening. I think this would have happened no matter what government was in power in Israel. Clearly, if they started a couple of years ago, they weren't to know that Netanyahu, with some previous Israeli prime minister called, what was the word he used? Sorry, Zionist terrorists or something like that in it. There are two people inside the current Israeli government. One is he's a finance minister, so he hasn't really done anything harmful as I can see as yet, but the security minister is somebody who had previously been a member of a terrorist organization. About 8 months ago, he insisted on going to the Dome of the Rock, into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and to try and really be extremely insulting towards the Palestinian population. Now, the thing with the Dome of the Rock, if you go to Jerusalem, you see it from all over the place with this big, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I should say, sorry. You've got this big golden dome, can be seen from all over the place. This is part of the original Jewish temple. Now, according to Orthodox Judaism, there was the central part of the temple was called the Holy of the Holies, and so this is the part where sort of God came to earth or something like that, and this part here was attended to by a high priest. And now, and only the high priest could actually go in there. When the Romans sacked the place, they actually took the curtain which divided this part up from the others, and they used that to put some of the stuff in which they'd looted. Now, the problem with the Orthodox religion is that in theory, as we don't know where the Holy of the Holies stood, we know approximately, we know where the temple was, more or less, and but therefore, as nobody's allowed to go into, you're not supposed to go in there, and therefore, in any case, in Orthodox Judaism, you shouldn't be going in there into there in any case. Unfortunately, it appears that the security minister, although he may be a extremist Zionist, he doesn't believe in the Orthodox version of of Judaism. So therefore we are stuck with a problem, or maybe he doesn't know as much as I do, which I think may also be the case. He is interpreting it in the way which suits him. Now, when I was in Jerusalem, I've been there a few times, but we actually walked up, there's a road there that goes up the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and there was an Israeli army there, stopped us, said we can't go any further, and which was fair enough. I understand the reason for that. And so when there's a potentially dodgy situation, then you don't want people going in. But I have heard of people going in there, and they ask them if they've got any religious things on them, which crucifixes or whatever, and said not to take them in. And that also yarmulke or whatever, and so then they don't let you go in, and so that's fair enough. But by deliberately trying to provoke the Muslim population in Israel, in Eastern Europe, in on the West Bank, East Jerusalem, then this would just make things worse. And it's these settlers who are clearly, in many cases, deliberately trying to force the local population to leave. And this will come down, I think, very, very heavily. I mean, you've seen examples of this. If you go to Israel, you can see, actually, you can go in these roads which lead to these settlements. You've got barbed wire on both sides. I mean, the huge security which goes with it. And you've got to say, what is the point? Is this because these people believe Judea and Samaria was part of the, well, it was part of the Jewish kingdom 2,500 years ago? Yes, I agree, but I mean, that doesn't give somebody the right to kick off the people who are living there today. And furthermore, it seems to me to be unnecessarily making your life very difficult. So David just said, when you go looking for a fight, you'll find it. I agree. That's precisely what will happen. I believe that. So it's the lunatics on both sides. Now, I would say that this is up to the Israeli government to make the first effort to do something about this, and that's what they ought to do, is to control the lunatics. And when Netanyahu went into a coalition with people of this nature, then this was clearly asking for getting the results that they got. I would hope, of course, that the Palestinian Authority would maybe be able to do something, but I do appreciate the difficulties. In 2006, there was an election in the Palestinian Authority. Fatah, the PLO, if you like, got 41% of the vote, and 44% of the vote went to Hamas. There was a brief fight with Hamas, and Hamas took over in Gaza, and the PLO, Fatah, got the West Bank. Hamas is a comparatively new organization, but its origins date to the Muslim Brotherhood. And one of the reasons why Egypt, for example, doesn't want to have these people in, anybody from Hamas in Egypt, is because they've already got enough problems with, and they've had problems in the past, quite severe ones, with the Muslim Brotherhood. So that is the reason why Egypt won't actually open up for Gazans to leave. Gaza was part of Egypt only for a short time. After the first Arab-Israeli war, the original suggestion of the United Nations was to split the country in two, or the province, I suppose, in two. Part would go to the Jewish state, another part would be an Arab state. The Jewish state ended up being Israel, but the Arab state as such never came about, because Jordan took what was the West Bank and Egypt took Gaza. So these two places were parts of those countries. Israel occupied Gaza twice, first time in 1956 and held it for a few months after that war. In 1967 it captured it for a second time and it held on to it. Egypt renounced any desire to have Gaza. I think it was in 1980, can't remember now, 82 I think it was, but Egypt has renounced any desire to hold it, as has Jordan also renounced any hold over the West Bank completely. So good, right. Anyway, sorry, I'll go through. No, sorry, I've got my computer open here. I thought I'd go through on the phone, but it's easier on the computer. So thanks for everybody for coming here. And anyway, Janet says that Winston Churchill had anti-Semitic ideas. Well, he did say one or two things, but I wouldn't really say so. Right, okay. Albert writes, I've just read 850 dead at a Baptist hospital in Gaza. That's disgusting and not self-defense. Now, I don't know if that's true, by the way. I'm just repeating what Albert here, who I suspect it might be the original Albert Speer as well, because he died in London in 1981. But yeah, if it is it is completely wrong. But the problem is this, and this is if, as it is, there are attacks from Gaza, which is theoretically a sort of an independent territory, and these attacks have been going on for a long time. So Israel does have the right to fire back. And the problem is this, is if the terrorists are in these hospitals, then the question is, how are they supposed to return fire? And this is where the whole problem is. So effectively, what I suspect may have happened, I don't know, I'm not there, but I suspect that either a target was incorrectly interpreted, but what we have seen from the Israelis is giving warnings, you've got to leave and all the rest of it. They don't want to cause, I do believe the Israeli army doesn't want to cause civilian casualties. I'm convinced of it. But the thing is this, if they tell everybody to leave and go somewhere else, surely the terrorists are also going to leave and go somewhere else. That's number one thing. And number two thing is, if the terrorists go somewhere else, then they're just going to have to bomb somewhere else, aren't they? I mean, it's horrendous to think that the hospitals themselves are being attacked in this way. And this is what Hamas wants. It wants to be it's a recruitment drive. Kill 850 people and maybe you'll get 20 more recruits for Hamas, and maybe you'll get more money. Bear in mind that the leaders of this organization aren't in Gaza. They're in Qatar or in Lebanon or somewhere, or Iran or wherever. So one thing that we do have to remember, of course, is that those countries which may support Israel, the governments may support Israel, this may not be the feeling of the local population. Why now? One of the questions actually is, is probably, it could have been to derail the peace process with Saudi Arabia, although I doubt it actually now. That's often, a lot of people say that, but it's illogical. If this was planned 2 years ago, then I don't think, or maybe they planned to think, yeah, well, we'll try that sometime. I don't know. Right, okay, Neela says, reports say that Israel bombed people on safe routes and in supposed safe zone. Now a hospital in Gaza is going back to their homes to want to die there. Do you think Hamas expected that? I would say this, is that I know that many people, when they come to die, they want to die in their own home. I know, you may as well die in your own house rather than die on the road somewhere. I can absolutely understand that one, and I suppose I would be the same. I don't want to die in some forest or broken building or something like that. I can understand. I believe that, I mean, there was something I saw on Twitter again, and it was claimed it was an Israeli atrocity, but it was quite clearly, it was a bombing, and it seemed to me as though the bomb had been actually planted from below, not from above. No, I'm not an expert in these. I'm sorry, I don't know a great deal about these things, but it certainly seemed to me as though it had been Hamas that actually set the bomb off, and it didn't look from the damage, in my limited knowledge. So I believe that it may have been Hamas also doing these things. Of course, I don't know. Anyway, David says the Romans were mad that there was no treasure in the temple. I thought there was treasure in the temple, because there's that arch in Rome. You can see them pinching the menorah, for example. I've forgotten, Arch of Titus in Rome. Neela says, I don't see what's gained by having hostages in the situation as is. Right, okay, I do see what the point of having hostages is. They want something for them, and look, when they held that Israeli hostage from 2006 to 2011, they got 1,029 of their own prisoners released in exchange. This is the problem of holding hostages, because of paying people off, as I said earlier. Anyway, David said this builds anger in the Arab streets, and Chris said Arabs dancing in the streets, not for a while to come. One thing I'd like to say, I watched the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom on being interviewed on Sky News, and she was saying that, blaming all Palestinians for this. And this, unfortunately, is also part of it is not the fault of everybody in Gaza. No more it's the fault of everybody in Russia that there is this dictatorship which is murdering people in Ukraine. It is not the fault. Nor is it the. I mean, I do appreciate that in Israel now there may be a lot of anger about what had happened. Mr. Herzog, who incidentally whose father comes from Dublin, the president of Israel, he was saying, well, the Gazans should have rebelled against Hamas. Well, I would say to him, why didn't he go there and rebel against Hamas? He could have done it by himself. He could have immigrated and then he could have rebelled against them. He could have done it. He didn't do it. He expects other people to take these risks. Has Israel been supporting any opposition groups to Hamas in Gaza? I don't know. Maybe they have been, but I would say that unless, but by blaming all Palestinians, dehumanization of Palestinians, this makes the problem get worse and worse and worse. I appreciate that 1,400 people were killed in horrific circumstances, but if we're to avoid the next 1,400 and next 1,400, next 1,400, the cycle of violence has to be broken. And what Israel is doing right now is not breaking that cycle of violence. I get the impression that it's neither the one nor the other. By giving the warnings, by trying not to kill people, but at the same time destroying the buildings, at sometimes even with people inside them, then Israel's taking a half measure. It either should either go in fully to take Hamas out, which I don't think they would, or it's to find some other means to remove them, which is less deadly for the population. That's how I see it should be done. But how that should be done, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. I appreciate that the terrorist leaders are hard to get to. It's not somebody you can just take out at any time. I appreciate that. Anyway, good. Sorry, so Janet writes, just before I came on here, I read that Turkey sides with Israel. Is that true, or have I misread? I think but Turkey was on the side of Israel. You know, these Arab states don't want Hamas there either. I mean, many of them have their own problems to deal with. So there is also this fight between Shiite and Sunni in many countries. Look at the civil war in Iraq. For us, most of us don't know the difference between Sunni and Shiite anyway. And another problem, I should maybe mention this, is Lebanon. Now, I've never been to the south of Israel, but I do know the north relatively well. And just often talk about Hezbollah. If Hezbollah comes in, Hezbollah apparently has got between 100 and 150,000 rockets. I mean, it's horrendous amount. So they've got all these rockets, but all these problems that exist in Lebanon. Hezbollah is in the government in Lebanon, and I wonder what the average Lebanese person's thinking right now. Do they want to get involved in the war when they've got all these dreadful economic problems as it is? That is my question. In Gaza, there's 60% unemployment, but the regime in Gaza has all this cash to spend on rockets for terrorist attacks. So that's what they are. They are terrorists. They're not. It's not a military operation or anything of that nature. When they're using the word fighters, for example, Al Jazeera is even using it for those butchered the innocent people. I mean, it's not right. These are terrorist acts. Anyway. So, I hope I've been fair in that. I hope I've been fair to both sides, or I hope I've equally criticised both sides. Because I do think that the only way to peace is by talking about it. Because if not, then the only alternative is to wipe the other side out completely. That's the only other alternative. And that peace has been obtained in some circumstances where it's really difficult to get it. The trouble is if somebody's house gets blown up and then they go on about it for years and years afterwards, and this gets passed through generations, this hatred will actually stay. In Northern Ireland, we never thought that there would be peace, but well, it seems to be peace, and it seems to be holding. So I mean, that's the only thing I can say. It really is sad though in Israel. You drive and you drive. If you drive there's that motorway that goes from the north to the south, and you drive down there to Jerusalem. You got these huge border wall. As you and so at times there's places where you've got the blocks of flats on the other side, and you look at the sort of the people in there. You can see people as close enough to see them, and they're on the balconies and things of this nature. And you think, well, okay, those people at the top can see over. It's not so much of a problem. What about the people at the bottom that have this big wall suddenly built in front of where they live? Okay, thanks very much for watching. I don't know what I'll do tomorrow. In fact, I was surprised to do today. Oh, I see Erdogan's talking to Hamas about releasing the hostages. Well, that's nice of him. I think the Qatari regime as well could, because Qatar is one of the Qatar, where Al Jazeera comes from, which I do use as a source for information. In fact, so this is concerned, it's my source of choice. But Qatar is it's funded terrorism, and now it's one of our allies. Yet it's clearly in with Hamas. I mean, it just doesn't really make much sense. Okay, thanks for watching, and one day I'll have to do on the 6-Day War, because the 6-Day War is one of the most interesting wars, I think, ever. And also the 73 war as well, the Yom Kippur War, which is 50 years ago. It was on right now. Yom Kippur War, which I would have to say, in my opinion, it is I would say amongst the most brilliant military strategies of all time. Anyway, that apart. Thanks for watching. All the best, and bye for now.